Welcome to the SWADE Pro Show podcast. Please note this episode is about true crime. The views and opinions expressed by the host and guest on this podcast are their own and do not necessarily reflect the views of any organization that they represent. The content is for informational and educational purposes only and should not be considered as professional advice.
Listener discretion is advised.
Hey guys, welcome back to the SWADE Pro Show. I'm Stacy, and today I have Miss Arkansas Amy with me again. You're going to love this episode, but before we get to that, tell us a little bit about yourself, Amy.
Hello, my name is Amy Jones, and I have a degree in American history, U.S. history, and then I have a minor degree in Arkansas and Southern Studies, and I also specialize in African American history. So I have a history from UCA, so if there's any, go Bears, anybody out there. Anyway, I enjoy all things history. I actually work for the Department of Arkansas Heritage. This is my business, my job, my hobby. This is everything. So I get questions a lot of, hey, do you know about this? Or, hey, do you know about this? And I love to answer questions for anybody that, maybe your grandma told you a story about Arkansas and you're wondering, did that really happen? Well, you can always contact me, and I would love to have a conversation or an email or anything to let you know. So if you have any questions out there about Arkansas, if I don't know, I'll find it out. So you can reach me at my email address, and it is just one word, Arkansas, all spelled out, Amy, A-M-Y, at outlook.com. Okay, so, and another thing, because I'm looking to maybe venture into an Arkansas Amy podcast, I would like to maybe see if there's interest in having that sort of thing where we just talk about everything Arkansas, not just history. And so I've started a Facebook page, and again, it is under Arkansas Amy. And if you find it, then it has a picture of the Arkansas flag, so you know you're at the right place. So there's not much on it yet, but we're going to put a lot of these podcasts on there, and we're going to put just different things. I love Arkansas in all aspects. I love the cooking, the people, the demographics, the economics, and the history, of course. And so I would love to have that conversation just with anybody. So that's who I am.
I like Louisiana food a lot more. So I like Arkansas food, but I like Louisiana food a lot better.
Well, here we eat, we eat the squirrel a lot.
That's right.
We do.
So today's show I'm really excited about because I've watched the show Primeval with my wife.
American Primeval.
I'll get it right in a minute.
That's
I'm sorry.
Okay.
I'm really excited about it because that show just told a little bit about what you're going to talk about. Yeah. Not only are you going to talk about the real history, it's not going to line up with the show exactly, because the show, I think, kind of hinted on that. Mm-hmm. Whereas you're going to say this is what really happened. So what is this called? Is this called like
what the crime scene is today? Because this is your true crime in the true crime fashion.
Thanks for saving me.
That's okay. It's called the Mountain Meadows with an S. Mountain Meadows Massacre, and the Mountain Meadows Massacre happened in Mountain Meadows. So it was just a part of the Utah Territory, and that's what it was referred to. Now, while the American Primeval is a fictional dramatization,
right.
I did try to see, I thought, well, maybe it was based on a book. It's not really based on a book. There's not an American Primeval book out there.
Right.
Yet there might be one day.
I can't believe there's not a season 2.
I can't believe. But I do appreciate, it's a Netflix series, and I do appreciate that Netflix put it out there because it is an event in American history that affected so many people and so many families. Even to today, it affects so many families. And so I watched a little bit of it again the other day just to refresh what they did do. And if you know the history of it, then you see the names of the people that come up and stuff, and you go, oh, I know, he was a Mormon, or I know that was part of the wagon train. But you don't have to know that to watch that episode.
Exactly.
It actually happens in the first episode is when it happens, and then the rest of the story kind of goes around it. So
refresh my memory on that first episode, because I remember the boy and the mom in the very beginning.
The boy and the mom was in there, but it was also, the massacre was also part of the first episode. And so the boy and the mom, I think she was trying to get to California to run from the law or something, and she was taking her son, and she met up with, as wagon trains usually did, they'd leave with a certain amount of people, and then as they go on their trail, people would join them. And so there was a Mormon family or something that she was going to ride with to go. And so she actually got herself right in the middle of the massacre, but she wasn't really part of it at all. And so they did a really good job weaving their story through what actually happened.
Yeah, there was something that happened. I don't know if it's the first episode or not, but I remember saying to wife, that's what Amy was kind of talking about.
Yes.
So that's when I finished it or whatever. I called you, hey, I got to hear about this.
Hey, you. If you're enjoying this, why not give us a like and consider following us wherever you get your podcast? Sharing is caring, and we would love your feedback, so drop us a line. Now, back to the SWADE Pro Show.
Well, and in the story, they also show this woman got away. She escaped.
Right.
That didn't happen. And so nobody escaped. And so there was no one that lived through it like they put, except for the innocent children, and we will talk about them. But no woman ran off in the woods and got away from them, because they made sure everyone was dead. So they did a good job weaving that through the story, and I do appreciate that. I know, if you put a story with history, people relate to it more. And so that was a very good job they did, but they didn't do a lot of what led up to that. They didn't do why would the Mormons do this? They didn't lead up to why did the Indians were involved? They didn't answer the questions of what happened afterwards, and what happened to these babies, and what happened to these. And so that's why I'd love there to be a season 2, because I think they would answer some of those questions, because that's really where the story goes. Now, I'm glad you brought that up, because today we're gonna concentrate on what happened before they left Arkansas, and we're gonna concentrate on the actual going through the actual massacre. But then we are going to have an episode 2 where we concentrate on the aftermath and the children that were saved.
I'm ready here.
And all the way, because there's actually 20 years between the date of the massacre and the date that someone was finally convicted and tried and everything for the crime. 20 years.
20 years, that's a while.
So, and it... Yeah. So, and
if you're young,
it ended up, it ended up with all these 120 people massacred. But then the one man that the Mormons kind of made the scapegoat was John D. Lee, and he was tried and convicted, and we'll talk about that. But he was also shot by a firing squad, and he was taken out to the Mountain Meadows to be shot. So he was shot on the grounds.
Oh, wow.
By Mormons, actually.
Wow.
And so they just scapegoated him and said, you're the one that did this. He was an adopted son of Brigham Young. He wasn't actually Brigham Young's son, but Brigham Young at the time was the president, and the president, he called himself the president, but he was the governor of the He was the governor of the Utah Territory. So we had a president of the United States, and the Utah Territory was part of the United States. However, Brigham Young was the governor over that territory, but he called himself president over the whole area because they did not want to be recognized as Americans. They wanted to be recognized as Mormons only.
Right. I think they did that in that show, too.
They probably said part of that. So once you know some more of the facts and you watch the show again, it'll answer a lot of these questions, because you might think, who does this guy think he was? Well, here's who he think he was. He thought he was the president, and they were going to be their own country, and they talked horrible about Americans, but they were actually Americans too. I told you a little bit about who Being Young was, and let me tell you about the two captains of the wagon train of what we're talking about. They were called the Arkansas Immigrants by the Mormons. That's what they just labeled them, Arkansas Immigrants, but they were actually the Fletcher and Baker wagon train. And so there was Captain Alexander Fletcher, and it may not be Fletcher. It's Fencher. Fincher. Yes, I'm sorry. I was saying it wrong.
You're good.
Okay. Captain Fincher and Captain Baker. And they were the two leaders of this wagon train. So actually, Captain Fincher this is what he did for a living, and he would take wagon trains back and forth to California. The Bakers were from up around Harrison, and he organized the people up around there, and they kind of hired the other guy to come, and so they were both captains of it. And now, there is another person that's in another movie we're going to talk about that is a name that I've seen before, but I haven't really researched her a lot, and I probably will before the next one. But her last name was Dunlap, and I believe it's Nancy Dunlap. And Nancy Dunlap was a woman whose husband had died, but she had children, and she wanted to go with them on this wagon train. Well, so there's another movie or documentary about this happening, and it shows her wearing pants and carrying a gun. And the Mormons were particularly disgusted by that because they said, a woman is not supposed to look like a man.
Right.
And, but she was kind of like the third in charge of this. And she was like, I just have to get my kids there, and my husband's died, and that kind of thing. So anyway, so they leave Harrison, Arkansas. They leave left in late April, early May of 1857. And so there was a few people that joined along the trail, like it shows in the Netflix series, joining up. There was some of that. There wasn't a lot of that.
So it was spring in Arkansas.
It was spring in Arkansas, and they wanted to get to California before winter and get through Utah and all that kind of stuff before winter. So I believe they originally thought they'd get to California about October, first part of November, I think is what they thought.
That's a lot of time to...
Yes, but this was a prime number one wagon train. They had over like 50 head of cattle, and they had like several dozen prize horses, and they had gotten Kentucky horses that had been raised for racing, and they were taken to California. They were going to start racing.
That's why it took so long, because you got such a big...
Yes, you had such a big... You had cattle, and you had oxen, and you had all these things. A lot of the farmers who traveled in this made sure that their cattle was pregnant before they left Arkansas. So the gestation period would be, as soon as they got to California, they'd have more cattle. And it was very valuable,
because you could sell those little...
You could sell them, yes.
Whatever, baby calves, whatever, you could sell those when you get there.
Yes,
awesome.
or you get to start your new herd at your new location. Right. So some of these people had been before, and they were now came back to get their wives and kids and were taking them. Some of them had never been there before, and it was just California was supposed to be where you could make a lot of money raising cattle, where you could make a lot more money even farming. And so these were pretty, I would say, middle class for sure, if not upper class people from Harrison, Arkansas. Here in Harrison, they had farms, they had businesses, they had family that they left. There's a cemetery in Harrison, Arkansas, even today, that a lot of the family members to these families are buried there. And there is also a memorial there that says, this would be where they would be buried if they had died in Arkansas.
Wow.
So, yeah, because this affected pretty much wiped out 25 families.
Goodness.
If you talk about 120 people.
Wiped them out.
Them out.
No more bloodline.
No more, yeah.
Wow.
A lot of no more bloodline. And But the interesting story and the aftermath in part 2 that we're going to talk about is the very few little things that happened where one person got left here or one person got left here, and now there's bloodline. So the most interesting of that, and I have a few other stories, but I'll tell you about the Bakers. The Bakers had a very prosperous farm in Harrison. And so Mr. Baker took some of his sons, I think 2 of his sons, and all of their stuff and everything. And his wife was supposed to stay back and sell the farm. And so he left one of his sons with her back in Harrison. And so when the whole family was wiped out, there was still a Baker in Harrison to run the farm. And there is still Bakers in Harrison today from that bloodline.
Do you think that was a decision he made just... I mean, is that what that would be due back then? Leave a boy and the mom behind and carry on the bloodline, or?
Well, I really think I've looked at there's different things of that, and it was almost like he really didn't want to, but he wasn't going to not sell his farm. So mom just really needed to sell the farm. No, they had no idea they were going to be killed. It was not a bloodline
I was just talking about like a formality, that like the military won't take the last son or whatever.
No.
Okay.
No, they had no thoughts of that. It was just strictly a financial thing.
Okay.
But it was great for the Bakers because, I think I've told you before, I know somebody from the Baker family who would not even exist today if they'd all got on that wagon train.
Right.
So when you think of that, it takes a little bit more out of a Hollywood movie into reality. And, these were not people who were like, oh, we're destitute, we're dying in Arkansas, we have to go somewhere. They were not. They had a lot of family heirlooms with them, and that were expensive. And I'll go through a list of some of the valuables that they had in the aftermath show, because all of that was taken. Some of it was recovered, but it was at least a lot of it was cataloged and people knew what they had. But you would take your family jewels. You would take everything you had. They had a lot of gold. They had a lot of money.
Yeah, because they were uprooting.
Yes, they were totally going to California to start over. So, okay, here's the story, how it happened. So they're traveling, and they heard, before they got to Utah, they heard, well, if you go, a little bit outside, about 40 miles outside of Cedar City, Utah, then there's a place you can resupply, and you can, get water and food and all that. Well, so they were kind of trying to go that way when they got to the Mountain Meadows, and they thought they were going somewhere where they could get supplies. And, they were pretty low on supplies, and so they would see people as they travel. And a terrible thing is, there was a Mormon family that was killed and totally killed because he sold them onions as they drove down the road. He had onions, and they were just, here came the wagon train, and he sold them onions. And later on, when the Mormons found out, they killed him and his whole family. And so, but before we get to this, let's talk about why they did this, okay? The Mormons' religion was started by Joseph Smith, and he had a brother named Hiram Smith. So Joseph Smith was the mayor of Nauvoo, Illinois, okay? And it was mostly Mormon families. Mostly his church was in Nauvoo. But there was a newspaper in Nauvoo who interviewed some of these families. Now, this is way back. This is like 1830s, okay? Interviewed some of these families and said, do you have more than one wife? Do you practice polygamy? Right. Is that what you do?
Right.
And some of them said yes. Some of them said no. They asked if Joseph Smith, their prophet, had wives, and they were told to lie, that he didn't. And so anyway, this newspaper prints this article. This is kind of how Joseph Smith ended up dead. Prints this article and said, he's lying. He has 30 wives. Oh. And Joseph Smith, it was very sketchy how many wives he really did have, but researching that just a little bit, he had 30 wives, and at the time they were his wives, 11 of them were actually married to other men. Because in the Mormon religion, if you had a wife, maybe you had 3 or 4, if a prophet or someone above you said, God has told me that woman's supposed to be my wife now.
Right.
They come and take her. And so he had done that with 11 of his wives. And when they are taken, they not only leave their husband, they have to leave the children that they had with that husband. They have to just leave and go with whoever. And so the prophet also could say, well, maybe she's not supposed to be my wife, but she's supposed to be your neighbor's wife. And so you just had to just say, okay, here's my wife. And you did not question the prophet. The prophet, Joseph Smith, said that he was like Aaron in the Bible, that God was using him to be the mouthpiece on earth. So anything he said came straight from Jehovah. There's a lot of words in Mormonism if you don't understand why they're saying what they're saying. And even in the Netflix series, they call the Arkansas immigrants, they call them Gentiles. Okay. Well, Gentiles is something that Jewish people call anybody who's not Jewish. Okay. But they weren't Jewish. They were not Jewish. They were Mormons. And so, but they called anybody who wasn't a Mormon a Gentile. And so you got to kind of know that too. You hear that a little bit.
Why did they do that?
Because they believe as Jews are the chosen people of God, that they're the chosen people of God.
So that was kind of like an anti-Jew then or whatever. You're either Mormon or Jew, and the Mormons are calling everybody like, I'd be a Gentile.
You'd be a Gentile because they thought they were at an upper level of it, you know. And I really don't understand all of why Mormons would do this, but it was part of, they picked and choose from Jewish religion. I am Judeo-Christian, okay? So I do practice Passover and that sort of thing. So I know a little bit about that, but I am not Jewish blood. And so I can't say I'm Jewish blood, okay? But I do understand some of it. So they picked and choose things out of the Old Testament that they wanted to twist into their religion.
Their whatever narrative or whatever.
Yes, or their narrative.
Right.
And so here's a fact, and I'm not throwing Mormons under the bus because you can Google this fact. One of the things is Jews do not believe that Jesus was the Messiah. Okay. Judeo-Christians do believe Jesus is the Messiah, but Jews were still looking for Messiah. So Mormons believe Jesus Christ was a prophet. And so that when Jesus died on the cross to atone for our sins, that was good. And he could atone for some of your sins, but not your major sins. Okay, if that makes any sense whatsoever. So they use that a lot. They even say that some in the show if you pick up on it. So that means
I'm going to have to go back and watch that show for sure.
You have to watch it. So if you murder someone and you spilled their blood, it all is about blood is what this atonement is. It's all about blood. Blood for blood. So as a Christian, you can believe I can murder someone and Jesus can forgive my sins. Okay?
If your heart is pure and repent and your heart is pure about it.
That's what Christians are taught, okay?
That's not something I would know or you would know. It's just between you and the Maker.
That's between you and Jehovah. That's what they, and Mormons call God Jehovah, okay? But we do believe that is a possibility. Now, see, Mormons don't believe that's a possibility at all. And so they believe if you spill blood, then blood must be spilled to atone for that.
Is that the eye for the eye thing?
That exactly. Okay. And also, if you're a Gentile, then there's different levels of heaven. Now, you cannot get to heaven. Now, if you're a Mormon and you have 3 wives, I don't even know all the doors of it, but you got to have the 3 wives to get to the top heaven. So I don't know, at least 3 wives. Yeah. But there's different levels of heaven. And the only way a Gentile can get to a heaven is if their blood is spilled. At this time, I'm not saying what Mormons believe right now, but I'm saying this is what Brigham Young taught these people that did this crime. He said that if we spill these Gentiles' blood, because they are horrible people, they are going to hell. They've killed Mormons in the past. They're here to kill us. He said all this hate monger stuff to them, and he said, so you are doing your Christian duty by spilling their blood so they can at least get to the lowest room of heaven.
Wow.
You talk about your brainwash and your hate monger.
He was Hitler before Hitler.
He was. And it's an occult. You know, it's a cult. And it's a power cult that teaches you. So there's another movie out there that I first watched about 5 years ago that kind of got my interest in this, because I read a lot about this whole incident and find out new stuff all the time. And of course, as research is better, we find out better things as we can go back. But it's called September Dawn. And I found it on regular YouTube. Doesn't have to be YouTube TV. Just put in September Dawn, and it says the whole movie. And it's like an hour and a half. And I've watched it recently, and of course it has a love story twisted into it too. Right. However, as I'm watching it, I'm going, oh, that's historically right. That's right. That's what that man's name was.
Which is odd.
Yeah. Well, they did a really good job, like putting the right Mormon names to the right incident. They did the right names in the wagon train. So it helps you understand a lot more than American Primeval. Okay,
right.
And but it's not a Netflix series, you know. Right. So but it's a Hollywood movie. It's got music and all the pretty lights and all that stuff. So if you want to watch something free, go on YouTube and watch that. And
there you go.
Answer a lot of your questions. However, that movie doesn't tell a lot about the aftermath either. It shows just a glimpse of John D. Lee's trial and then him being executed at the end. Right. So we're going to fill in the blank in the next episode. Right. We're going to fill in those 20 years and what happened, because these kids that were saved came to Arkansas, flourished, and now have bloodlines here too. Okay. So, all right. So, why did they do this? I'm sorry, I'm going back to why they did
this. Is interesting. I love this.
Okay, Joseph Smith, when this newspaper wrote this article about him, he ordered his militia, there is a Mormon militia at this time, he ordered the militiamen to burn down this newspaper and destroy it because he wrote this negative thing about him, okay? Now, he did a bunch of other things, but the governor of Illinois, which he wasn't, he was just the mayor of that town. The governor of Illinois said, come talk to me. Why'd you do this? Come talk to me. Well, Joseph Smith refused to go talk to him. Well, then the governor said, well, you know what? Now you've committed treason because you didn't do what I said. So he was actually arrested and taken to Liberty Jail in Liberty, Missouri for treason. Okay. Now, Liberty Jail in Liberty, Missouri is a whole nother interesting story. He was there for, let me just remember my facts. So he was there for approximately 172 days. That's a long time.
Yeah, what's that, about half a year?
About half a year. And during that time, it's like an upstairs and downstairs jail, one room downstairs, one room upstairs. Not a big place.
Liberty's kind of small, right?
Yes. Yeah. And they allowed him to have visitors, all kinds, all the time. Oh. His wives came, his children came. He had Bingham Young was there. He told his church how he was running everything from this jail. And so what happened was there was still more, there was a lot of unrest with the Mormons and not the Mormons and all of this. And he was still spewing hate to people who weren't Mormons from the jail. Right. So there's a lot of things that led up to it. But one night a mob did form and went to the jail. And they did not know that, Joseph Smith and his brother Hyman Smith had been so loosey-goosey with doing whatever they wanted to do.
Right.
They cooked on a stove. They had food brought in. The only thing about that jail that I think was even a little uncomfortable is at night. In the daytime, they were allowed to roam the upstairs and downstairs of this jail. At night, they were put into what they called the dungeon, and it was a hole in the middle of the downstairs floor, and they had to go down. It was kind of like a root cellar. They had to go down there and stay there for the night and lock it up so that the jailer did not have to sit there all night with them. That's basically what it was.
Right.
So, but they didn't realize that one of these visitors had snuck a gun into Joseph Smith. Okay. So he was armed. And so the night that this mob came to do whatever they came to do, they came in and, there's some accounts that they didn't know if they were there to kill him or if they were there to talk to him. Who knows what they were there to do. And they came it wasn't nightfall yet. He wasn't in the dungeon. He was upstairs in the upstairs room. They came up on the landing of the stairs. So before they even got to the upstairs, he shot and killed 2 people and then shot another time and wounded a man. Shot 3 times at him. And so they did come in and they shot Hiram and they shot Joseph Smith there.
Wow.
And
him and his brother. And
I'm not sure if there was other people, but you can take a tour of the Liberty Jail still.
Oh, wow.
It is a Latter-day Saints museum site, okay? And in a lot of my research, when you go there, they don't exactly tell you the whole story. And on the ground in this upstairs room, there's a frame around a blood spot, okay? And they say, oh, this is the blood of the prophet. He was shot, and this is the blood of the prophet, okay?
Right.
But it wasn't really. Actually, historical documents have proved that was his brother's blood, but then their answer to that is, well, it's the same blood, same bloodline. So it's Hiram Smith's blood on the ground. Anyway, that whole incident is what set the Mormons to, we have to atone for the killing of our prophet. Okay. So, like I said, Liberty, Missouri, Illinois, there's a tri-state area where Arkansas, Illinois, and all that. That's what the whole area of this stuff was happening in. So when they get to the Meadow Mountains, they had their own kind of trauma going on in Utah at the time. At the time, because Brigham Young, being governor, was not doing the things the president had said. So he had told him to do certain things, and he was like, no, I'll do what I want. This is our Zion. We're going to live the way we want to live. So he had told Brigham Young, I'm going to send troops to make sure you do what every other American's supposed to do. And they took it as an act of war. So they call it the Mormon War. And so he was constantly telling his congregation, prepare for war, store food, store everything you can. And we're going to go to war with America. Well, they were in America. Right. So basically the story was that here come the wagon train. They needed to rest their cattle. Their cattle needed to graze, needed to water. They needed to take a few days to camp out and let the people just rest from, I don't know if you ever rode in a covered wagon. Oh, bumpy, no traction. It's just, you would just get beat up almost.
I've been in an old Jeep.
Well, kids couldn't sleep, no, kids are not sleeping during the day. It's not like you're taking a nap in your Suburban like now.
Right.
So they knew Baker and Fincher.
Fincher.
Yeah. Okay. Baker and Fincher knew that their people needed rest. So they were, like I said, they were looking for a supply place. They were low on supplies already. So this was about around the first part of September 1857.
Goodness, they're just now getting from April to September, just now getting to Utah.
To Utah, yes.
And It sounds like that's just the wrong time, people at the wrong time.
Well, there's not a lot of documents. Of course, everybody's dead.
Right.
But to put the piece of story together, Brigham Young was upset at America. So Brigham Young declared martial law. And he said, you will not travel through Utah without a travel pass from me, from Brigham Young, the president of Utah. Okay. Right. So that's what was going on with the Mormons at the time they showed up. And they just showed up at the wrong time, the wrong place. That's basically how it was. So they had no idea about this travel pass.
Right.
They didn't know. They didn't realize they were doing something wrong. So they go to Mountain Meadows, and the Mormons meet them and tell them, well, you can't stop here. And they're like, well, our cattle really needs to stop. We have a lot of money. Let us give you a lot of money. We'll pay you whatever we can pay you. We don't mind that. We just need to graze our cattle for like a week, And they were not going to do it. John D. Lee was the one. He was the head of the militia in that area, the Mormon militia. Okay, and it's also, you got to remember, the Paiute Indians were in that area too.
Right, it was a trifecta of trouble.
It was bad,
and those Arkansas Mormons, people were just in the middle.
Didn't know what they were coming into. And the Mormons and the Paiute traded a lot, and they could speak each other's language and that sort of thing. So they had decided they're not Americans. We can be friends with them. So they had kind of an understanding with them. So here comes the wagon train, and they said, we really need someplace safe. We've got women and children and all this. And they said, so finally they said, okay, you can stay. You can stay for 2 weeks if you need to stay that long. And no, we're not going to take your money. There's this great line in September Dawn. It said, one of the Mormon leaders says, we will not charge you for what God has provided. Okay. Extremely Christian, these folks protest to be. And they said, but we're going to take you to this area where you'll be protected by the Indians, because there's Indians out here and the Indians could really hurt you. So, they built up how dangerous the Indians in the area were. The Paiute Indians were really not that dangerous, okay? But they had to build that up. They were trying to get their friendship. So there's a lot of different accounts of the different days of what happened. But basically what happened was they let them camp for a little bit. They went out there. They had dinner with them. They met them. The wives met the other wives. They what they were trying to do, and what their leader had said, is go spy on them, see what they're really here to do. And these people came back and said, they're really nice, they're going to California and all that. And they said, no, that's not what they are. These are horrible people who killed Joseph Smith because they are from Arkansas, which is next to Missouri, which is close to Illinois. So they are the same people, and they are only here to help the United States government kill us. Is what the hate that they were spewing. And of course women had no say whatsoever, but the men, and they were saying, this is your Christian duty to avenge Joseph Smith's death and to give these people away into heaven because they are just doomed to hell. Okay. So there was a lot of that talk for several days. So the Mormons were very good about doing things, but not trying to look like they did anything. They didn't want blood on their own hands. So they actually went to the Paiutes, who they had this little relationship with, and they said, now this is where it gets a little fuzzy. We're not sure if the Mormons actually did this or if it's just they said this is what happened. But there was a stream that the Paiutes used to water their horses, to bathe in, to all that. Somehow this stream had gotten poisoned by like anthrax or arsenic or something, and things like that happened. And so a few people had died from drinking the spring water. Now, we can speculate and say the Mormons did that to set up the story, or it may have just been an act of nature, whoever, whatever. Right. But they went to them and they said, oh, we were told by this party from the wagon train that they poisoned that spring, because they wanted you to die and they wanted your people to die. Like 2 Indian people died, but then a lot of cattle died. And so this was a big thing. And so they fired up the Indians against these wagon trains too, because they were like, well, you need to avenge that. And they were like, well, we're peaceful people. We're not here to do that. And they said, oh, you're going to let them kill your people? Right. So they got them all involved. And it was about September 7th. And they'd fired up the Indians. So kind of half of the Paiutes said, yeah, they were mad and they wanted to do something. So they attacked without warning the wagon train. The Indians did. Okay. However, they didn't do a lot. They shot some arrows. They did kill just a few people, but they attacked without warning. And what the wagon train did in response was take all their wagons and make them in a circle. And they say they put chains around the wheels so that they wouldn't be able to get out or get into their circle. They also dug pits by their wagons so that they could get down there with their guns if this happened again. And it didn't happen. I mean, it stopped. It was just like a small little attack, and it stopped. A few people died, but not a lot of people. And some people were injured. There were several people injured. And so here comes the Mormons, like the next day, riding out with a white flag, saying, oh, we heard that the Indians got you. We're so sorry. And some accounts say they actually prayed with them, and, God protect you. And we just don't have these problems out of the Indians usually. We don't know what's going on. We're so sorry. But they were really setting up the Indians. So, that's September 7th. September 8th, there came just a few more little things. Maybe a fiery arrow was shot and into the camp and set something on fire. And so you got the Indians with arrows. That wasn't being done by Indians, though. It was being done by Mormons in the grass line around them.
That's kind of like the show where they were,
Yeah.
they had the
hoods on.
The hoods
yes,
on.
yes. So that was accurate.
Right.
And there was even Mormon men who would put mud on their skin because back then it was either you were a red man or a white man.
Right.
And so they didn't want, if you were a white man doing this, it would point to the Mormons.
Right.
So they would put mud on their skin. They would dress up like Indians, but it was just a little harassment for a few days. But during those days, you've got this wagon. You got people that are injured inside. They're running out of water. Their cattle doesn't have tending to. They can't tend to their horses. Right. They're trying just to huddle together because they don't know when the next attack's going to come. So they're starving them out. They're totally running out of water. They were low on supplies in the first place. So here they are in that situation. So then it comes to September 11th, which is a date we all know very well.
Yeah, I got married on that day.
Oh, well, there you go. Well, we all know very well. And if you're of my age, you know where you were on September 11th with the Twin Towers and the terrorism.
Right.
And that was terrorism outside of American people, terrorism onto America, okay? And so there's different things that happened. This was 1857, and of course, the Civil War had some battles. There were a lot of people died in one time. So outside the Civil War, this massacre that happened on September 11th, 1857, was the biggest massacre of American people on American soil until the Twin Towers were hit on 9/11.
Wow.
Yeah. So, yeah, and just for fun, if you want to have something fun to do, Google 9/11 and see what comes up, because you will see throughout history there are things that happened on 9/11.
I'll do that.
Yeah.
So
September 13th, like we all say, Friday the 13th, that was September 13th, and the Knights Templars were all massacred.
I didn't know that.
So September, that week's just not a good time. You know,
it was for me.
Well, it was for you. Yes.
Not for her, but it was for me.
There you go. There you go.
So what happened on September 11th?
September 11th. The morning of that, what had happened was Brigham Young had left the territory. Actually went to like a whole nother state and was on record by doing a Mormon wedding, which they call sealing to each other. And it's a private ceremony between just you, the man, the woman, and whoever's doing the sealing. So during this time, that's where he was. I mean, there's documentation of it and everything that he was not there. But did he give the order? That's the whole conspiracy thing. So John D. Lee says he did give the order to spill the blood of the Gentiles, that it was the Christian duty and it was time. Because, backing up a little bit, they were pretty upset with the Paiutes that they didn't kill everybody.
Right.
And the Paiutes are like, well, that's not what we do, you know. But they were like, no, you need to finish it. You need to do this. The Mormons didn't really want to do this ever. They didn't really want to put their hands on it. So, but because it was just partially done, they said, we're going to need to finish this. Okay. So Brigham Young has an alibi. He's out of the territory. Right. John D. Lee gathers all the men up, tells them all, this is your absolute duty.
Christian duty.
Right. And duty to John Smith. We're avenging his death. And this you will be rewarded when you get to heaven, and celestial beings will whatever. Yeah. Whatever they do. I don't know. Anyway. But a lot of brainwashing. It was horrible. And so if you watch September Dawn, it really digs into that, because it ends up with the love story that's twisted around. I won't give a lot of it, but one of the Mormon teenage boys decides he's in love with one of the girls on the wagon train. And so he was trying to stop the Mormon men from doing this because he wants to marry this girl, and they chain him up where he can't get out there to warn her. So,
that'd be horrible.
It's a good movie, but and that is one thing. The separate little stories, okay, like we all love the movie Titanic. Okay,
that's what I was thinking the whole time. Like
the
this,
whole time,
this is a
Titanic
tragedy
movie
too.
The Titanic movie is again example of a lot of people that died. So if there was a big love story, it probably wasn't told. Okay. Right. However, you take the story of the Titanic, which is another one of my passions, and you put a love story with it, and we all watch it over and over.
Right.
And so we don't forget.
Right.
I'm sorry.
You're okay.
I get so, no, I'm good. I just get very emotional because I don't want people forgotten.
Right.
These people in the Meadows Massacre, they didn't mean to die that day. They had no plans of it. The people in the Titanic did not mean to die that day. Yeah. So it's not like they're like, oh, I'm old and sick, I got cancer, I'm going to lay in this bed and die. That didn't happen.
Right.
And there's children, and there's people, and there's legacies, and there's families. And it just really overwhelms me that people don't know more of this, okay? Because I think I've told you before, when I'm so passionate about historical research. When I research this, of course, I'm a single old lady that lives by herself, so that might be part of the problem. But I do feel like, Captain Baker's sitting in my living room going, let me tell you what happened on this day, because I'm reading these documents or these accounts, and it gets so very personal for me. And then when I see family members who go, yeah, that was my great grandpa, or that was this, and I mean, it's very personal to me, and I think it should be something we never forget. I think the people that died in the Twin Towers in 9/11, I love how they read their names every year. They read their names in a memorial every year on 9/11 down there at Ground Zero. And the reading of the names takes hours and hours and hours. Good. But you know what? They're not forgotten.
Right.
And every year, 9/11 comes on the television. It's on History Channel. It's over and over. I mean, you can't really live in America and let that day go by that you didn't know what happened, okay? Right. And so hopefully 300 years from now, we're still remembering them because they got up and went to work that day.
Right.
They weren't planning to die.
Almost the same kind of scenario.
So,
right. People not expecting. Mm-hmm. And I think it's kind of worse for the people in the wagon because they thought everything was good.
Oh yeah.
They thought the Indians were the bad people. So when the Mormons came up to do what they did, they probably just let them in.
Oh, yeah. Oh, they sure did. I mean, they were like, oh, we're so sorry. You've gone through this. Right. They unhooked their wagons. And so here's the deal they made with them on September 11th. They said, now, look, we're going to get you out of this meadow. We're going to escort you to Cedar City. It's about 40 miles from here. We're going to escort you. We brought all these men to escort you out. Now, they didn't know that the men on horseback that were the Mormons were not all the men that were there. There was men hiding in the grassy areas around. Those men wore, some of them had hoods over their heads. Some of them had Indian attire on, that sort of thing. And there may have even been a few Indians mixed in there who said, hey, we're going to go finish the job. We don't know. Right. But the Mormons orchestrated and gave the order. And so the setup for the order that was given, and this is documented, they said, okay, we're going to escort you, but for your safety, here's what we need you to do. You can't take your wagons. You can't take your cattle. You're going to leave all that here. And leave all your valuables, leave everything here. Plus, you need to give all your weapons to us.
I thought you was going for that.
Yeah, all the guns. And they were like, why should we give up our gun? And then in one of the movies, it said, one guy said, well, we've used all our ammunition anyway. What good's a gun, really? So if that's what you need, because they said, what we're trying to do is show the Indians that you're under arrest by our militia, and they're not going to have any more problems from you. Right. That was their claim. Let us help you. Let us get you out of this mess.
I mean, it's a good story.
It's a good story.
And you got to remember, we're on the back end of saying you shouldn't have done that, but at the time they thought that was their friends helping them.
Yes, and they were thirsty and hungry and had nothing else. It wasn't like it was just a normal day.
It's just a bad situation.
People were bleeding. People were wounded, and arrows had come in. So of course that's Indians. We didn't know. Nobody knew the difference. Right. And some people had been shot at that point, but a lot of arrows. So unfortunately, the Mormons did have bow and arrows too. Mm-hmm. And so it's kind of sketchy from here. Some Mormons were really sworn to secrecy, big time. I mean, that was part of their covenant that they made to go into their Mormon faith was not just this, but anything that happens in this church, you are sworn to secrecy. Okay. Wow. It's a big deal. It's like their covenant between them and God that they don't speak of things. And even to this day, there's Mormon marriages and stuff that you cannot speak of. You can't go, your friend who's a Mormon is getting married, they're not going to invite you. You can't go. It's a secret thing.
Do they do that with moving?
Yeah, they might do that, yeah. But it's a secret thing. It's like the ceiling even. And, you know, I hate to bring this up, but we've all watched The Sister Wives. And even the sister wives, when he would marry a new wife, they went to the temple and had a private ceremony. They may have a big reception later, but you don't see the ceremony. So Mormons are very much of, we're going to keep our practices kind of like a, you know, Masonic lodge or something. You know, we're keeping it. You, if you're not in it, you don't get to know it. And they were taught from an early age, you just don't talk about it. And if you know something, you just don't speak of it.
Wow.
And there's a Mormon saying in the is it Jessa in that group of Mormons who's practiced polygamy in Texas? I think his name was Jacob Joseph's.
I would
Jacob. I'm sorry. Anyway, recently in the last 10 years, there was a Mormon camp that was raided, and they took all the young children and the young wives, but one of and they all dressed in old prairie style. Jacob. Anyway, people know what I'm talking about. They can find it. But anyway, the man's in prison now because they were practicing polygamy and they were marrying young girls and all this. He's still in prison. It's not like Jacob, it's like Jacob or something like that. It's his name. But anyway, when they raided that camp and found all that, you saw these signs all over that said, don't say anything, keep the secret, keep sweet, keep silent. Women especially, there is a keep sweet word is what they use, and that means don't say anything about anything. Even if you're upset or mad about anything, you don't say anything. That's what that practice
control.
was taught. It's
that's complete control.
Complete control. And so, like I said, these women had no rights at all in this. So anyway, they tell them, give us your weapons. And then they separated, because that's what people do. They separate you from your family. They took all the men, lined them up in front.
Right.
They took all the women and the children and lined them in the back. They actually started the men out walking first, and I believe they were far enough away they couldn't see each other. They said like a quarter of a mile, or the women couldn't see the men. Okay. And they were far enough away where they couldn't see.
Give me your weapons. Let's separate the women and children and men. Right.
And leave all your belongings.
No.
And you're walking 40 miles with your children.
I know.
Your
Again, this is hindsight, but still, I wouldn't do that. Like, no.
Yeah. And they were like, if you don't, the Indians are going to come just kill you completely. We're saving your life.
Right.
Yeah. And so they did that, and they had. You know, that's when people get you, when they isolate you and they take away your water, they take away your food, they get you where you're like desperate, you don't think you have anything else to do, so we're going to do this.
I guess what else you got to lose?
Exactly. So they were leaving all their wealth and everything. They were leaving everything. And so anyway, they start walking, and John D. Lee is on horseback, and he's with the men. And he's with the men that are walking in front, you know, all the men up there. And he says to the Mormons, this is how it begins. He says, Mormons, do your duty. Those are the actual words that he did speak. And when he did, they shot all the men. And when the shots were fired, they may not be able to see each other, but the women, of course, start screaming and everything. And then the men dressed like Indians and with hoods on and everything came out of the woods and surrounded the women and children. Some of them were shot with arrows, like lots of arrows. Some of them cut their throat like they were sacrificing a lamb in the Old Testament. And because all of this, you got to remember, in their mind, we're not murdering anybody.
This almost sounds familiar with 9/11. It almost sounds familiar with current day stuff.
Exactly.
History repeats itself.
Exactly, because it's the same type of thing. That's a very good analogy.
Because what they're doing, they believe, you know, That's what they're supposed to do.
That's what they're supposed to do. And isn't that the lie that's told to people when we need a lot of people killed?
Right.
So I'll finish the women and children here in a minute, but if you think about it, think about the possibilities that were killed that day. It might have been 120 people, but they were going to go to California, and they were all going to have their own 120 people.
Right.
There was going to be presidents. There was going to be, astronauts. Right. There was going to be everything coming out of that legacy. So it was like we are going to destroy these families right here, and a lot of them were completely destroyed. And so 25 families at least, bloodlines, at least 25 bloodlines. So anyway, I'm sorry. Another thing they told them after they separated the men and got them walking, they told the women, if you have a child who is, if you're carrying a baby, or you have a child, there's a little bit of fuzzy about this. Some say 8 years old, some say 6 years old, but it was really that anybody who could tell the story, if they were old enough to tell the story, then they didn't have to give them that child. But they didn't say that. They just said, we need all your children. We're going to put them in this one wagon. Like, give us your infants, okay?
Right,
There were 17 children altogether. And these moms didn't want to do that. They're like, we'll walk. We'll carry our baby. We're fine. We'll walk. And they're like, no. You need to put all of your children in this one wagon in case we do get attacked again, that we can protect your one wagon.
They thought that they must have told the women that was Indians attacking your men up ahead or whatever.
Yes. Oh, yeah. Yeah. So they were like, let's protect your babies. So they put their babies in this wagon. Now, some people think it was eight and under, because 8 years old in the Mormon religion is the age of accountability. Before that, you're not accountable.
Right.
But there's a little fuzzy on that. My research, and I'm doing a lot of research on that, and I'll have that on the next episode, but I believe the oldest children were 6.
Okay.
And, but they didn't want things said like, my mama was killed by an Indian,
right,
or my mama was killed by a white guy.
Right.
They didn't want children that could say that.
Right.
So, I mean, there was nursing infants. A lot of them were just absolutely nursing infants, and they just handed their babies over.
Goodness.
And so then that's when after they got the children that they were going to get, that's when they started killing the women and children. And because they felt like those are innocent blood. See, it's all about shedding blood. That's innocent blood. So we're gonna get the innocent out, and then we're gonna shed the blood of the people who did this to Joseph Smith, and at least try to get them to heaven. So that was their thinking. And so what they did to the bodies afterwards is really horrible also. They robbed them of everything.
Right.
They took all the clothes off of all the victims, and they left their bodies out there because they said, well, they don't need it. We're not going to give them a Christian burial. Well, that's what one of them said. We're not going to give them a Christian burial. So as it was like, maybe they laid there 12 hours or so, and somebody said, we can't just leave them all laying here. And they did dig like 2 very, very shallow graves, and put some of them in them. Some of the Mormon men came back and did that like at dawn of the next day, okay? But not all of them, because they're spread everywhere.
Right.
120 people within a mile and a half radius here. So, but what they did is they left them out there, and the wolves came, and the wolves teared the meat from their body, and then left their bones. Their bones got bleached in the sun, and their bones laid there. And it was said that because this was a frequent trail to California, that wagon trains reported for up to 2 years.
Wow.
As they went past this area, there was bones bleached in the sun, laid out there.
Wow.
So if you can imagine, that's horrible afterwards.
Right.
That's a horrible
It just keeps
after
going.
effect. Yes. So, so there is a light at the end of the tunnel for these children that were saved, because, like I said, the army from the United States was already supposed to was coming on their way.
Right.
Okay. So
how many children were?
17. 17, most of them infants.
Okay.
17. And what they did that very night, can you imagine? What they did that very night after they did all this killing, left the bodies laying out in there.
Right.
It's nightfall on September 11th.
Right.
They take all the Mormons that had done this killing, and they take these children, and they go to the house of John D. Lee, and his wife's preparing a big old meal, and they feed the kids, and the wife starts taking care of the kids. They put them down to sleep. They do everything.
Wow.
Yeah. Yeah. They
But the kids are so young, they don't know any better.
They don't know. But the people know what they just did, and they're sitting there having dinner with them.
Yeah, but I mean, they don't know how to, like, say that.
No.
They don't know.
No, but if you just killed somebody's baby, I mean, could you sit there and eat dinner and look at the baby?
These people are crazy.
Crazy. I mean, they were just, and they said it was a celebration, and they went into the night celebrating.
Wow.
And so anyway, so the next few days, what they did with the children is they farmed them out to different Mormon families who either maybe they couldn't have a child or they just had so many that one more was not going to be a problem. And so some of the kids, not many of them stayed together. There's a story that I will tell.
Well, of course, you separate them and be quiet.
And it's like we don't know who's brother or sister is who, you know.
Right.
And so I think there was a story of 3 sisters that did get to stay together, but I'll tell more of that in the next part. Because the good news is it took a year and a half. First off, this was reported a little bit. Imagine everybody's dead. So who's going to report this?
Right.
Okay. But word gets around. And some of the wagon trains are like, why are all these wolves? Because they said the wolves would howl so much. And the wolves just set up camp right there because they had an endless supply of food for months.
Right.
So that kind of drawed the attention of people going, what happened? What happened? What happened? And but it took months, of course, to get out. You know, I always say no Facebook, no Facebook, no multimedia.
No instant TikTok.
No,
or
none of that. Exactly. Right. So how does word travel?
Slowly.
So it traveled very slowly. But then as the Mormons saw it was getting out, they were like, oh, yeah, it was a horrible thing. These Indians did this right here in the territory. And they just it was so awful. And these were nice people. And we had got to know them. I mean, they spun their own version of it. It's even in newspaper accounts. There's even the President of the United States sent 2 or 3 people out there to say, get the statements from the Mormons, exactly what happened. And so there's different accounts of, well, so-and-so said this happened. And then and they said, but they did poison the stream. These were not good people that died. That's a document, a governmental document in the Library of Congress that says the Mormons told us these were really bad people. They were hateful and awful, and all they did was talk about killing Mormons, and they'd come out to kill all the Mormons, and they hated Joseph Smith, and then they poisoned the stream to hurt the Indians. So it wasn't like a bunch of good people died. I mean, the whole story was just spun. And it's really a sad thing when you think about it, because they didn't believe that was the only atonement that they needed to do for Joseph Smith. This was not like, okay, now we've done it, we're good.
Right.
Didn't happen like that.
It's ongoing.
It was ongoing.
Goodness.
It was ongoing. And there's many stories of wives who were multiple wives in there who would want to leave or something, and they would kill them. Or they would, I think I mentioned before they'd even camped, before the wagon train even camped, one of the Mormons had a farm, and they passed him, and he sold them onions. Well, so after this happened, they found out this man had sold them onions, and they killed him and his whole family and all his wives and all his kids. And so total annihilation was what they were going for. We can't leave a witness. We can't leave anything. And Brigham Young was like, oh, this is a horrible thing. I wasn't even there. I don't even know what happened. Right. I don't even know. And they didn't even admit to any of it for years and years and years.
Right.
And then they finally said, oh, John D. Lee just went crazy by himself, and he did this and all of this. So we'll get into more of that story later. And I also will say in the next episode how long it actually took the Church of the Latter-day Saints to actually publicly say, okay, this did happen.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. And that's I think it was 2008.
Oh,
finally admitted.
Wow.
And
so we're talking
1850. 1857
to 2008. Or after 2000, I mean.
Till they actually officially said, yeah, you're right, this happened. And before that, they spun their story.
Right.
And if you know anything about the Church of the Latter-day Saints, here's the situation. I don't know that much about it either, but I'll tell you what I know. If you want to be a Mormon and you're not a Mormon, you weren't born into it. To be a Mormon, you have to trace your family tree back as far as you can. And then I don't know if they approve your family tree or whatever it is, but you have to have all your genealogy done. Okay. So we all know Ancestry.com. Ancestry.com is ran by the Church of the Latter-day Saints.
I didn't know that.
Oh, yeah.
Oh, wow.
Lots of the Ancestry stuff are. Because
that makes sense.
They're very good at is historical research. And one thing Mormons are very good at is writing everything down. So there was Mormons who actually wrote the official account of, hey, today we went out and killed all these people and we did this and this and this. And that's how we know they went to John Lee's house and had a party. Right. Because they're scribes. They had scribes that traveled with them because Joseph Smith believed everything had to be recorded. So that is a trait of a Mormon to record everything. Yeah. And so Ancestry.com is there for that reason because it was started. Ancestry.com's headquarters is in Salt Lake City, Utah, and you can go there. And I mean, I'm not saying it's a bad thing because they're very good at what they do. Right. And many families have been put together for that. But that's why we actually even have it. Because before then, there wasn't a big database. It was you could go read their church records if you wanted to, But then as the internet evolved and everything, then it's gotten to that. So, but you had to know your bloodline because bloodline's a big deal to them. Okay, so you had to know your bloodline to be accepted as a Mormon if you wanted to join the church. You had to know that. You still have to know that to this day. So that's one thing. And so bloodline's very important. And then even if I've even heard that it's, let's say you're John D. Lee's bloodline, or say you're Bingham Young's bloodline. And I'm
a prophet.
Yeah. I mean, you've done these things. I mean,
I don't want to make people mad.
The man had 20-something wives. There's a lot of bloodline out there. Bingham Young's running around. He was planting the seed. But we have Bingham Young University.
We do.
Bingham Young University. So is
that the same thing? Or just
gosh, yes, that's in Utah. It's a Mormon university.
I didn't go to school or whatever. I just went to high school.
I didn't go to school. Okay.
Well, I didn't go to college, you know.
Yes, that's a university. It's in Utah, but it's the Bingham Young University.
Wow. I've heard of that school, for basketball. I think they were just in the stuff, but
they were. Wow. Of course, we have Oral Roberts University too.
Right.
But yeah, so Salt Lake City is the head of the Mormon Church. So anyway, so there's a lot of, it just kind of shows that we are all from the same seed. We're all related. We're all brothers, sisters. We can all trace us back to something. And, but they would judge your family, and they would judge it differently. Like, say Bingham Young was your dad, but you wanted to be a Mormon, or he was your great-great-grandpa or whatever, and you wanted to be a Mormon. Well, the crimes that he did against humanity, they don't see as crimes.
Right.
So they go, oh, yeah, that's good. You're good. Oh, you're the prophet's child. Come on in.
Right,
yeah.
Right.
Because they judge it under their lens, not under what we would as normal human beings.
Right.
It's kind of like the Hitler University. We don't got one of them, but we could, Right, because there are certain people that think that was right. So crimes against humanity are looked at through different lenses depending on who you are.
Right.
And so that is really what happened here.
I hate it for those people because they were just the wrong place at the wrong time.
They were. They had potential. They had a lot. I mean, they had money.
And they started from Harrison, Arkansas.
They started from Harrison, Arkansas. There was some that came, because Harrison's up towards top of Missouri.
Right. It's on the line.
So there's some that came from Missouri. There may have been some that came from around. But, I mean, they paid to be there, too. It wasn't cheap.
Right.
And that's why they had a lot of money. Yeah. So anyway, I think we can wrap it there for right now, and then we'll go to the next episode, because the next episode I'll recap that a little bit, but I won't have to go in so much detail.
Right.
And hopefully then, and I'll tell you names and ages of these people that were saved, these children, and different things that they did, because spoiler alert a little bit, is when the Army did come and round them up, because their relatives back here in Arkansas were like, when they finally found out this happened, they were like, what do you mean they saved the babies? Where's my baby?
Right.
You know?
Right.
And so there was some senators in Arkansas that got involved. There was some Arkansas politics stuff that got involved. And so when the Army went out there and retrieved these children from the Mormon families and brought them back to their relatives, these people lived, had lives, wrote books about it, that kind of thing. And so we'll talk more about that. And you know, it is, they said there was an account of one girl that said, I was an infant, and they don't think I know anything as an infant, but I think my body remembers the trauma of being there. So,
wow.
So that's our little teaser for the next time.
Yeah, definitely.
We will get into that and talk more about that and say some of the names, since these are Arkansas family names that a lot of people might know.
That's right.
And so I do want to put in one more thing.
Yeah.
If you want to research this, please be very careful with how you research it, YouTube it, Google it, all that stuff. Consider the source of what you're reading. Right. Because you need to do that with every historical account.
You honestly need that with everything.
Everything. So don't just take the first thing that pops up.
Right.
Now, because there is Church of the Latter-day Saints accounts, there's Christian researchers that have done accounts, there's even non-religious researchers that have done accounts. The Library of Congress has a lot of this on there.
There's stuff everywhere.
There's military records from when the Army went out there. I've read some of the military records because they tried to catalog what was in what their valuables were. Right. So consider what you're reading and consider your source. But if you want to know more about it, I would first start with watching September Dawn on YouTube.
I want to do it,
and it'll answer a lot of these questions. And I'm going to get into more of the names of people next time. And so, if you've ever heard a story, please, if you've ever heard a story of my grandma said, we had people that were in that group, email me, please.
That'd be awesome.
We'd love to talk to you. We'd even love to have you sit here and be a guest with us.
Exactly, we would. Goodness.
And so if you have more questions about this, email me, arkansasamy@outlook.com. I will respond, and we would love, we're Central Arkansas located, so we would love to talk to you and maybe give you more information on your own family. I have a lot of families that contact me to do genealogy for them and that sort of thing, and research history, things about Arkansas. So I'm always here for anybody for that. So anyway, but thank you so much, Stacy. This has been great.
Man, I cannot wait for the next one because I love this stuff. I do. I love history. That was the only class I somewhat paid attention in. So.
Well, we are,
and that's only because the teacher said you only have to learn it one time. It only happens once. It's like he's right. He's right.
Right.
I just learned it one time, and I got to study no more.
That's right. Well, I am a lifelong learner. I'm learning every day. But and what in my job that I do, I research all kinds of different things about Arkansas every day, and it's a blessing to have that opportunity. Right. But I do believe we are honoring them just even by this podcast. So I do appreciate that because, like I said, these people become very personal to me. And I believe that they don't have a grave. Right. They don't have there's no cemetery. Right. There's nowhere to visit them. There is a memorial at the Harrison Courthouse downtown. There's a memorial, and then there's a memorial, big iron cross at the local cemetery there. So so you can look at that. You can see some of the names, but let's just honor these people because, like I said, they didn't make this decision to do
no,
this.
No, they didn't. So. They were lied to and in the middle of a bad situation.
So
Well, thank you, Amy.
So much.
Thank you.
Thanks for listening to the SWADE Pro Show. See you guys on the next episode.